Welcome to this week's edition of Flashback Friday, your opportunity to get some good review by listening to episodes from the past that Jason has handpicked to help you today in the present and propel you into the future. Enjoy.
This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to Creating Wealth with Jason Hartman. During this program, Jason is going to tell you some really exciting things that you probably haven't thought of before and a new slant on investing. Fresh new approaches to America's best investment that will enable you to create more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Jason is a genuine, self-made multimillionaire who not only talks the talk, but walks the walk. He's been a successful investor for 20 years and currently owns properties in 11 states and 17 cities. This program will help you follow in Jason's footsteps on the road to financial freedom. You really can do it. And now, here's your host, Jason Hartman, with the complete solution for real estate investors.
Hey, welcome to the Creating Wealth Show. This is your host, Jason Hartman. This is episode 512. And I've got Sara here with me. She was in Memphis and Jackson, as you heard on the last show, and she is our top investment counselor and has been with me many, many years and has lots of insights. And I'm always trying to twist her arm to get her on the show. Sara, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. I have a little bit of a Memphis hangover.
What does that mean?
Oh, well, you know, we flew in late last night and just a busy weekend. Lots of fun, lots of learning. So I'm just playing a little bit of catch up today.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, it really was a good weekend. You know, we did 3 days in Memphis and 1 day in Jackson, Mississippi. As all of our listeners know who listened to the last episode, we recorded the Jackson, Mississippi just as we were going out to look at properties. So now, having spent the entire day yesterday looking at properties, we have some impressions to share with the listeners, and I'll start because I don't know if you want to start. So shall I start on my impressions?
You should start.
Okay, all right. So my impression is that Jackson is a good, mostly C-class market. Now, of course, there are some beautiful areas in Jackson that can be A and B-class markets or property types. But in Jackson, the stuff we saw with our provider there was, I think, a solid C, maybe C plus class neighborhoods. And of course, as is almost always the case, those properties have really good cash flow, at least on paper, but more demands in terms of management. They really require a little bit more attention. So again, it comes down to the concept of my commandment of the 10 commandments for successful investing, my commandment about financial planning, which is very important, and that's commandment number 4. But also, part of that is not really financial planning, because financial planning would involve things like, what is your risk tolerance as an investor? You know, are you willing to take large risks? Are you very conservative? Are you somewhere in the middle where you want to allocate some of your portfolio to higher risk properties that could appreciate more and have more appreciation potential, but the cash flow is not as good? And then your time horizon, your investment goal, whether it be capital appreciation, cash flow, tax benefits, income. But then another part of that is really your own psychology, your own personality as an investor. And for that, I would really say that, you know, the properties we have now in Jackson are good properties for someone who wants to, or is willing to, I should say. Maybe nobody wants to. But, you know, for someone who, number one, has experience with investing, and they're not new to the game, and they're also willing to pay a little bit more attention to their portfolio because of the type of tenant quality that you will most likely be dealing with. And, you know, those C-class tenants, or even C plus B minus tenants, not always, every case is individual, but they do require a little more attention, and most of the time. And so that's really the thing I wanted to convey about Jackson. I liked it quite well, but again, these are not brand new homes in yuppie neighborhoods. We have homes like that too, properties like that make good income properties, but again, cash flow not as good, at least on paper. Sarah, would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a good assessment. I think that Jackson has some potential. I like the provider. I had a great time. We probably looked at 8 to 10 properties. And, my takeaway was that of those 8 to 10 properties, there was one that I thought I would buy this. This looks like a good, clean property, better neighborhood, nice curb appeal. Still not a cookie cutter, neighborhood, but just a good, solid rental property. And so, we discussed after me giving that feedback to the provider, we discussed the possibility of getting more properties like that. So again, depending on your risk tolerance, you may be interested in the lower, $50,000 price point properties, but I don't see Jackson as like a big growth market. I don't see that you're going to get, any big rent increases there. Very good for cash flow, but I think a little more risky in terms of the amount of maintenance you might have. I mean, you might get lucky and have a good long-term tenant. And that's one thing, he did say was that these tenants tend to stay. A lot of Section 8,
Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment, okay? So the reason the tenants tend to stay is because a lot of them are on some sort of government-assisted housing program like a Section 8, okay? When you're on the dole, what real motivation do you have to change anything? And, when you're the type of renter who's paying $700 a month rent and living in a property that our investor can buy for $45,000 or $50,000, moving is a pretty expensive affair. Of course, you're going to do it yourself. Of course, you're going to have to rent a truck, but you're going to have to change your utilities over. You're going to have to put down new deposits. These are not in that class of property. They're not commonly, it's pretty rare actually, that they're upwardly mobile type of tenants. So they do stick around, and that's the one nice benefit. And again, on this tour that we went on yesterday, it was you, Fernando, and my mother and I. My mom has lots of experience with Section 8 government-assisted tenants, and I joked when we were in Memphis at the Creating Wealth seminar, I joked in front of the whole audience, I said, yeah, my mom complained about her Section 8 tenants all the way to the bank. Because as I was growing up and hearing her bitch and gripe about Section 8, she was creating a lot of wealth for herself. A single mom who, basically started with just one property and got another and she would complain about the Section 8 stuff, but gosh, it's dependable. It's dependable. And the interesting thing is that you didn't, I'm just going to say you did not love what we saw at all. You said 1 out of 8, I think, that you liked. My mom didn't like it that much either. And my mom's pretty scruffy, she's the extreme do-it-yourselfer. Oddly, she has, I guess, as much of a dichotomy in her personality as I do, probably, because, I'll get my hands dirty and dive into something and do it myself too. And I don't mean fixing up properties, because I don't do that anymore, although I used to do that a little bit. And she'll do that, but then, she lives in this beautiful mansion and, really likes really, really nice things and buys designer clothes. So it's just a kind of a contradiction. It's a funny thing. But Fernando, though, was the one who was different. And I was just kind of trying to be quiet and get the feedback from all of you and throw in my opinion later. Can you imagine that? That I didn't insert my opinion. But Fernando really liked it. He was like, oh yeah, I like this, because government rent, very dependable, and, great cash flow. But again, now he's got 4 years of investment experience under his belt with a big portfolio, and it's diverse. He's got some Class A stuff, he's got some Class B and some Class C. And his tolerance is willing to accept those more attention-sucking tenants, that just need more attention because they're people that aren't upwardly mobile usually, and it's just a different type of manager.
Yeah, and I think that initially these properties will outperform some of the nicer areas because they are higher cash flow. But I don't know. I would be curious what the 5-year picture looks like.
Generally speaking, and you're right, because generally speaking, and I mean, at least historically, and we don't know if this will hold that way, but historically, the nicer properties tend to have better appreciation. There was an old rule I remember many years ago, listening to one of the many real estate gurus I followed for many, many years in my 20s, okay? And one of them said, if you're in a neighborhood and you're driving around looking at properties and you see someone jogging, get out. You don't want to invest there, because that, in other words, his point was it was a yuppie type neighborhood. And by the way, I hope everybody knows when I say yuppie, that means young urban professional, right? That's an acronym from like the 80s. And so, he would say don't invest there because he liked that C-class stuff. Fernando liked it. My mom used to like it, I think. Now she isn't in favor of it because she just doesn't want to deal with the government. It depends, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think at some point you want to have a good, healthy mix of A to C properties. So I think the key is to be a seasoned investor before you, like you said, have experience before you go into, a C type property or properties. And I would definitely encourage you to go visit the market.
So what Sarah's saying, I think, is very good advice. There are 3 basic types of properties that we talk about, A, B, and C. And the A properties right now, of course, this is subject to change because everything's dynamic and fluid. But right now, if we're taking a snapshot in time in the markets that we recommend, Sarah, would you kind of agree that we could define some of this by price range? And I'm going to throw out some numbers. Let's see if you agree with them. We don't rehearse anything or talk about anything much in advance. So it's all raw, and here it is. Okay. I'm going to say that an A property in the markets that we recommend is anywhere from $120,000 to $170,000 for a single family detached home. Would you agree with that?
It depends on the market. I don't think you can compare all of our markets to each other. Like that would be a good, like a Texas property, Indianapolis maybe, but like in Memphis, for example, we saw a lot of Memphis properties, right? So they'll define sometimes a $90,000 property, which is significantly less, as an A property. And then, some people will distinguish an A property versus an A area, so keep in mind, it's a matter of opinion.
It is. And it's going to change. If you're listening to this episode 2 years from now, which I know people love to do, they go back and listen to the old episodes. And of course, we do Flashback Fridays too, at least currently. So I'm just trying to give the listeners some sort of idea as to what that means. And different providers define them differently too. And it depends where, it varies, but right. If you say,
so let's separate it by the linear markets and the hybrid markets. So the linear markets, I think the price point could be like 90 to 120, 130,000 would be your A area.
Let me explain that first. Okay. So 3 types of markets, linear, cyclical, and hybrid. We don't recommend cyclical markets, so we're not even going to talk about that. We do have mostly linear markets, the markets that just chug along and appreciate slowly. And then we have some hybrid markets who have a little bit on the edge. They get more toward the cyclical, but not much. They still make sense from a numbers perspective, and you can still get decent cash flow. So, okay, Sarah, that's a good way to look at it. So what are right now, in your eyes, the strict linear markets? They would be what? Memphis, Jackson?
Memphis, Birmingham, Indianapolis, those are the top markets that I would say are linear.
And hybrid markets that we have right now, and we're not really doing much business in these markets because they don't really work that great, okay? But at times we kind of move in and out of them. But I'd say a hybrid would be Austin, Texas, Denver, Colorado, Phoenix, Arizona. Atlanta is becoming a bit of a hybrid market because Atlanta has appreciated 10% in the past year.
And maybe even Dallas.
Yeah, Dallas is becoming a bit of a hybrid too, Now, you don't think Houston has moved there at all or has any hybridish nature to it, do you?
A little bit. We talked about that market this weekend. there's definitely a buzz about Houston still, and I know we talked about the oil prices, but I talked to a lot of people that still think Houston is hot. So it's...
Well, it is hot in the summer and it's humid too.
Well, I mean, it seems to have appreciated quite a bit over the last year, which is good for our clients that bought there a year ago, right?
Yeah, I've been very happy with my Houston properties for over many, many years now. And so, Houston, I did kind of issue a yellow light warning when oil prices were really, really crashing. They seem to have, found maybe a floor. It'll remain to be seen. So this is not a matter of you can say this is linear, that's hybrid, always for sure. Okay, it's a 50 Shades of Gray issue. Okay, boy, see that just saying that on my show is going to increase my show's transcript's SEO value. 50 Shades of Gray. Okay. Yeah, see, there were that's known as keyword stuffing, okay? So, and then if I say other keywords like Harvard University and Enron and, then I put a stock symbol next to it, that all the search engines will love us, right? Okay, so linear, hybrid. Okay, so linear, I would say other linear markets. Let's talk about more of those. St. Louis, Kansas City, what else?
I think we said them all.
We said all the ones that we're recommending at the moment, okay?
So I'm sure there's some others. Columbus would be a good linear.
Good. So anyway, that's the idea. And what Sara is saying, and I think this is excellent advice that you're giving the listeners, is that get your first experiences in A and B property types. And then once you're comfortable as an investor, so if you're new, we want you to start with A and B. And once you're comfortable and you've built up some mental muscle, okay, in this whole investing game, then dip into more of the C type properties, because the C's can be great, but they are a bit of a different animal. Okay. So
yeah. And keep in mind, once you have a big portfolio of properties, your portfolio will cover your vacancies and your maintenance items, and you don't feel it as much, when you're just getting started and maybe you have, 5 properties, you're still kind of in building the momentum. And so those vacancies and maintenance items that come up hurt a little bit more. And again, it goes back to the psychology of investing. So
if you have a portfolio and you have 10 properties and 2 are vacant, or 2 are, now remember, there's a difference between economic vacancy and physical vacancy. Say 2 are economically vacant, which means the tenant is in them, but they're not paying. Okay. So you only have a 20% vacancy loss in that situation. Whereas if you only have 2 properties and 1 is vacant, you have a 50% vacancy, and you feel a lot more. And, we've had lots and lots of clients on the show over the years. In fact, we've got some great client interviews coming up who have been on the show recently. And I love it when they share their real world experiences. We call it the good and the bad and the ugly. Okay. The good, the bad, and the ugly. One of your clients, Sara, who's been on the show a few times, and that's Bob from Colorado, by the way. Hey, Bob, you said, you've purchased 9 properties from us so far, and 8 have been great, and 1 is a problem child. Well, if you had 9 kids, it'd probably be about the same. So,
you know what? And Bob, he's like the perfect example of somebody who has the right mindset for investing, and he does well with some of the, C area properties. And I forget exactly what he said to me, but, he was kind of telling me about that one bad property, and he said, well, geez, I learned a lot. So
that's the thing in life. You at least if you learn something from it, you'll be in good shape. But the idea is to learn on our experience, not your own, whenever possible. Because we sort of aggregate all these client experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we share them with you on the show. Okay. And I think all our listeners know we're just super transparent about that. The ones we don't always share are the ones where the clients really shot themselves in the shoe.
You're never going to let me live that one down.
I'm not, because you're so funny. You have a few of those. You had a couple of others too, but very, Very good. Good stuff. Okay. So anyway, there we have summed up Jackson, Mississippi, I think, for our listeners for the moment. So if you're interested, jasonhartman.com, you can compare and A, B, and C properties. And eventually when we come out with our new software, we're going to actually be grading the properties right on the software. So, but I think most of our investors, if they've been listening for a little while, they can identify an A, B, or C property. But actually, we didn't finish that price criteria thing. So I want to try and take a stab at it. So hybrid markets, 120 to 170 is probably likely, though not always, to be an A property. Okay? And now there's some overlap. And I'm going to say 80,000 to 130,000. You notice there's overlap, right? That's intentional. 80 to 130,000 is probably going to be a B-type property. And then 40,000, yes, we do occasionally have these $40,000 properties, although we don't recommend them too much. Those are more for more experienced investors usually. So I'm going to say 40,000 to 90,000 could be a C-type property. But I don't know, Sarah, maybe you'll disagree with me. I mean, we've seen people get A properties for 75,000, 80,000 sometimes too, right?
Yeah, sure. In 2010.
Yeah, I meant B. B. Sorry. Did I say A? I think I said A.
Yeah, I think you've got it narrowed down pretty well.
Okay, good. So I just wanted to give that kind of guideline, and then you can tell by looking at them and all kinds of other counseling that we can help give you. But hey, let's talk about rents for a moment, okay? I'm looking at an article in New Wire. This is really... It's amazing how this happens. What goes on in the housing market is you always have prices take the lead when it comes to increases, and rents follow prices, and they follow them rather slowly. So the title of this article is Rents Increasing More Quickly Than Home Values in Many Markets. Well, duh, I could have told you that. Okay, that's pretty much always the way it happens. And even when home values level off or are declining slightly, you'll still see rents increasing because those are the lagging indicator. They always lag the prices. And here's one of the core differences between commercial property, and I've owned several commercial properties, apartment complexes, and residential properties, meaning under 4 units and under, okay? When you get over 4 units, so 5 plus, that's considered commercial property. And other types of commercial property like retail centers, office buildings, industrial buildings, that type of stuff. The core difference, and one of the reasons I really like housing better, residential property better, is because it's illogical. It doesn't follow the income. So if you're going to sell your apartment complex, now granted this of course changes, but generally speaking, the price or the value of that apartment complex will be determined by the income it produces. In a residential property, you listeners, as investors, you determine the value of the property based on the income it produces. But remember, you're a tiny percentage of the market. The rest of the world out there, even people who consider themselves investors, but they're really speculating and they're just gambling idiots, okay? Gambling fools, most of them. They don't consider income to be a big part of the deal. And if you want to know more about this, you can watch the HGTV show called Income Property. I mean, I don't know, Sarah, I don't know why they call that income property. It doesn't produce enough income. I would call that alligator property. That's property that loses you money.
Jason, I think you and your mom need your own reality TV show.
Hey, you liked hanging out with my mom, didn't you? She's pretty funny, isn't she?
Mom is fun. She's a lot of fun. Just so the listeners know, we had a 3-hour drive from Memphis to Jackson. Mom was driving.
And she was letting me DJ part of the way, so I got to control the music a little bit. Not always.
Yeah, she gave Jason a hard time about his music selection.
We put on U2. Now, who listening does not like U2, right? I mean, that song One by U2, that's got to be one of the best songs ever. It's like Stairway to Heaven. It's great. Okay, it's a phenomenal song. Sorry, listeners, if you don't like it, but you're crazy. You're like my mom, okay? Because that's an awesome song. Check it out. Go to your computer or your device and type in O-N-E by U2. It's an awesome song. Anyway, I put that on, and my mom is, oh, no, that his voice sounds too ugly. Mom, that's Bono. I mean, he's big time. And she goes, I know who he is. He's always talking about all these causes and political things. That's how she knows who he is, okay? But yeah, I got to control it a little bit, but not all the way. But she's funny. She's very opinionated, isn't she?
She is. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Ooh, okay, I guess you're right about that. Okay, back to rent increases.
Okay.
I'm going to just cut that one off. So it says residential rents in the United States are continuing to rise up 3.7% year on year to $1,362 a month. Okay, so they don't say if that's a median or average, okay? And keeping pace with housing price growth of 3.9% over the same period. So, of course, these are nationwide stats, and they're almost meaningless a little bit because all real estate is local, of course. But anyway, it is what it is. Here's what I want you to notice, though, listeners. That 1362 as the average or median, I'm not sure because the article doesn't say, interestingly, that most of our rents fall slightly below that. And one of the things, as Sarah and I were talking about A, B, and C class properties a few minutes ago, one of the things that I want you to consider as an investor, and one of the things that we generally do, sometimes we kind of break these general rules, okay, but it's a general rule, is that when we are in an area, we want to be investing in properties that are slightly below the area's median price. And we want our rents that we're charging our tenants to be slightly below the median rent in that area, okay? Because that always, I think, and this is just an opinion, it's not exactly data-driven, but it's just kind of from so many years' experience doing this, it always gives you the opportunity to catch a bargain hunter on the way up or down in the socioeconomic ladder, or it gives you a chance to have your price of your property and your rent on your property pulled up a little bit just by generally what they're comparing you to around in that market. Okay, Sarah, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's a fair statement. And the other thing we were discussing was, rent increases per the type of property. So, an A property might have a higher percentage of rent increase annually than your C property.
That is true. And see, the key there, and the same goes for appreciation, by the way, generally, these are all general things we're talking about. Nothing's set in stone, but generally speaking, what you're going to see on those A properties is that you have more potential for value increases and more potential for rent increases because the people that are living in those properties or purchasing those properties from you, if they're living in there as a renter or purchasing them from you when you sell them in the future, hopefully 27.5 years down the road, because that's how long I generally want you to keep your properties, they're more upwardly mobile. So their incomes, they'll find a way to increase their incomes and be able to pay you more. Okay. And so that's why, I always say try and target, but it depends on the market. Try and target a 4% annual rent increase. So that just means if you're charging $1,000 a month now, hopefully in a year you can get $1,040. Now, what is going to make that possible or impossible? Here are some of the factors. And again, every property is individual, so this is not a conclusive concept. But what is going to make that possible or impossible is what are the interest rates at the time that you try to get the rent increase? If rates are very low, and at the same time, if financing is plentiful and easy to get, it's going to be very hard, if not impossible, for you to get a good rent increase. You may have to even, when the market was really, really hot in 2004 and things were going crazy and we were obviously in a bubble time, and I predicted the end of the crazy expansive market in late 2005, and I was right about that. I predicted that just completely accurate. And I was saying that in all kinds of seminars. I had vociferous arguments with Orange County, California realtors, and they'd say I was crazy. Prices are going to go up 25% next year. I said, no, they're not. we're at the end. This is about it. Everybody's tapped out. But what's going to depend is, whether that renter has another option. And remember, if rates are low, that renter can go and buy. And that means prices are probably going up. And if they're paying attention to the housing market, they're feeling a sense of loss, a sense of scarcity. They're feeling like, they're having conversations like, hey, honey, if we don't buy a house, we might be left out. And so they're likely to be hunting for a house. This is the upwardly mobile tenant. But the Section 8 tenant who's living off the government, okay, they don't usually, they're not delaying gratification. They're not pushing themselves as hard. They're not exerting themselves as much usually. Okay. This is a general statement, of course. So them saving money for a down payment, even if the down payment is only $3,000, that's a big deal for them to do that. And so it just depends. If interest rates are very high and the option to buy something isn't possible, then the likelihood is you'll be able to get higher rent increases. But the value of your property won't usually in that type of market be appreciating. In fact, it might be softening and depreciating, but your cash flow will be increasing. So this is the kind of that 3 dimensions of real estate concept. Sarah, what do you add to that?
No, I agree. I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that. Just based on my own experience, I agree. The nicer properties tend to yield a little higher rent increase. And, my B properties, they've been kind of slow but steady. And I have yet to venture into the C class, which is why I have my opinion on the Jackson C class properties.
Now, I want the listeners to know something, though, is that when you see an article or you hear stories about rents increasing in a place like Los Angeles, for example, and maybe you hear me talk about this article and you hear me say, quoting the article, that rents are up 3.7% year on year. And in this article, prices are up 3.9%. Now remember, this includes the entire nation, okay? Here's one that's interesting in this article. It says, of the 17 metro areas where rents are growing more quickly than home values, the biggest differences are San Francisco, with rents up 14.8% year on year and home values up 9.6%. So that's San Francisco. Okay, well, check this out. Well, Kansas City rents are up 8.6% and the price is up 4%. One more. And Pittsburgh, okay, I used to live in Pittsburgh as a little kid. Rents are up 6.3% and prices are up 4.3% respectively. So what does that tell you? It tells you that in high-priced markets like San Francisco, I use the example of LA before I just glanced down the article and decided to read that little quip from it. Those rents are so out of sync with values that it's absurd. I had one of our people on the show that does some video production and podcast editing for us. His name's Patrick, and he was on an episode maybe 2-3 months ago. If you want to find that episode, just go to jasonhartman.com and type Patrick in the search bar, and you'll find him. He lives in San Francisco. And he lives right in a prime area in a rent-controlled house that he pays, I think, $2,300 a month for. And it's worth about $1.5 million. And his wife is a trademark attorney, or an intellectual property attorney, I should say. He's a great guy. And they're basically trapped. But oddly, they're not trapped in a bad deal. They're trapped in a great deal. I mean, when you can rent a $1.5 million house for $2,300 a month, he says that they think about moving and they kind of want to move, But their deal is so good that they're trapped.
How do they get that deal? I want that.
They got it in 1997.
And so their landlord just hasn't raised the rents?
They can't. It's rent control. It's against the law. Yeah. So it's the Socialist Republic of San Francisco, just like the Socialist Republic of Santa Monica down south, okay? And these rent control, it always leads to shortages and disaster, and it's every socialist communist program they never work. I mean, history is replete with examples of this, of course, right? So they're trapped. But if their rents went up by 20% next year, they would still be getting a phenomenal deal. You see what I mean? That's what I want the listeners to understand. These are why these stats are so misleading. It's because the rent-to-value ratios in high-priced markets, whether they be Miami, LA, San Francisco, San Diego, New York, Boston, whatever, just any market that's high-priced around the world, those rents are so far behind prices. They're lagging so much that it wouldn't matter if they had a huge rent increase. It's still a terrible deal for an investor. Because if you buy a property today in San Francisco and then you turn it into a rental, you could pay $1.5 million for that property. And because that renter hasn't been in there for years and hasn't been benefiting from these very limited rent increases that the rent control laws require, you could maybe rent your place for $5,000 a month or maybe even $6,000 a month. But that deal still stinks because for $6,000 a month, I mean, that should be a $600,000 value property, not a $1.5 million property with that 1% rent to value ratio target. So that's what's so misleading. And I'll just remember, Sarah, that years ago, like 2004, there was a Los Angeles Times article, and it just shows you how stupid the media is and how they mislead people. It talked about the 10 best and the 10 worst rental markets in the country. And it said, if you're a landlord and investing in Oklahoma City, you're really out of luck because the average rent there is only $763. That's not exact, but that's about what it said. Okay. And if you're a landlord in Los Angeles, you're doing great because the average rent is like $1,600. But they failed to even consider the price of the property in Oklahoma City versus the price of property in Los Angeles. Actually, the reverse was completely true. That article was absolutely 180 degrees wrong. But most people read that and they think, well, I better invest in Los Angeles then. Duh.
And yet it seems so obvious.
It is obvious, but you got to be listening to the Creating Wealth show and listening to my podcast to really know. We try to get, this is not exactly sophisticated stuff we're talking about, but compared to most of the world and even investors with a lot of money, don't let it fool you that people with a lot of money are sophisticated. Sometimes they are. Most of the time, maybe they are, but not always. Sometimes a lot of money makes you kind of careless and not pay attention to things. So I guess the take-home point is, with everything we've talked about today, Sarah, is that everything is an individual case, right? Every property is individual, every investor is individual, every tenant is individual, and you really got to think through the numbers and think through what type of investor you are, what type of psychology you have, and all of that.
Think, but more importantly, act.
Actually, that's the best advice you've heard all day, folks, because thinking will not make you any money. Only taking action will make you money. So be sure to get your investment portfolio going. And if you've got it going, make sure that you are always, always, always expanding it. There's an old saying for investors, and, of course, not all states have escrow, but in California and other states, you use escrows when you buy a house. And one of the sayings is, always be in escrow. In other words, always be buying something, So if your escrow lasts about, 45 or 60 days, that means you're buying 6 properties a year. Always be in escrow. Always be acquiring something. That has made people incredibly, incredibly wealthy over the course of history. You got to acquire assets. You got to control assets.
And I just have to say, I know we've gone a little long here, and
Oh, what's new?
So much for 20 minutes, right? You guys have got to come to Jason's Creating Wealth seminar. I mean, I go and I sit in the back of the room, every year or twice a year.
You've been to like 100 and some of them probably by now.
This is my, this month is my 8-year platinum property anniversary.
So you've been with me 8 years, and we've put up with each other that long, huh?
We have. We may actually like each other now.
I do like you.
Aw, how sweet. Hey, we did ride in a car for 3 hours together. Not many people can do that.
We did. We gave Fernando and my mom the front seats, and we were in the back just hanging out, DJing from there.
Yep, karaoke. More like karaokeing, right?
Karaoke, yes. Bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy through the levee. We did sing that one, remember? Yeah.
Yes, I do remember that. So, but back to the, seminar, you have to stay plugged into these events. There's nothing like going to one of Jason's live events, sitting in a room full of people that are like-minded. I mean, I get pumped up every time I just network with our own clients and, our new providers. And it's just really an incredible experience. So, I was sitting back there this time thinking, man, there were a couple of people that really wanted to come and couldn't work out their schedules. And I was really feeling bad that they didn't make it because it was just, very inspiring.
Sara, I want to comment on one other thing that you told me a couple of weeks ago. Every once in a while, we get someone who starts listening to the podcast and they're skeptical. This sounds like it's some big show and everything is contrived, right? And, I understand. Listen, there's a lot of shysters out there. There's a lot of scam artists out there. But we're real people. We're a real company. We've been around for a very long time. If you're skeptical, here's the best thing you can do. Come and meet, not us. Meet our clients because they're in the room. You're going to meet people who are real people that you can talk to without us there. You can go have coffee with them. You can go have lunch or dinner with them, without us. And you can hear their real experiences. Our clients who have been investing with us for years still come to our events. They repeatedly come over and over again. And I always feel like I'm getting up there just totally repeating myself and thinking they must be bored. And I don't know, maybe they are a little bit, but they still come. And one of the big parts of our events is the networking with other investors. Of course, you'll get to meet us too, and our team. But I think it's really more important. You're going to get to meet our clients and, maybe, I don't know, help me with this one, Sara, but maybe 30 or 40% of the room is a client. In other words, they purchased one property at least. And then 60, 70%, they haven't purchased anything from us yet. Would that be about right? That's my guesstimate.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. I mean, some people are coming back some people buy and they've never met us in person. And then, a year goes by and they're ready for more deals. And so they're coming out to tour properties, but they're getting the education too. And so, and then some of the clients that come out have been to several events. So, it's the thing about the seminar is that there's a lot of new content, even though it's the same philosophy and the same overall message. Everything changes every year. Things change, and having the lenders come up and talk about these changes and, it's endless,
Yeah. There's one more thing I want to say before we let everybody go today. We're always going longer than we think we're going to go. But when you start investing and when you start talking to people about investing and when you even talk with the providers we refer you to, okay, whether it be our local market specialists who provide properties in areas, whether it be our lenders, our legal advisors, and we've got a whole team. So, our slogan is the complete solution for real estate investors. We can refer you to pretty much everybody you need to make this happen for you. But the thing I do want to say is be careful who you listen to. Don't just go off far afield. We are the objective ones who provides referrals to all these different services. Just don't make a mistake by just, listening to some, half-baked advice. One of the worst areas of half-baked advice that I see, by the way, are real estate investors who, we talk about the 10 commandments, you might follow all of that, but it's when you go and you buy a one-off property, a one-off deal. One of the huge resources that we offer is that we have such a big volume of customers and a big volume of business, is that we have leverage over these service providers. And I just see people that go and, in one of the forum groups I'm in, people were talking about, some guy's got 3 properties that he's going to liquidate in McAllen, Texas. And someone tagged me like I should look at this. No way. I don't care. We don't do one-off deals. We do deals based on relationships where our providers have a big stake in our referrals continuing and our clients being happy with the results. So I'm telling you, if there's one thing to avoid, it's the one-off deal syndrome, because you're just never going to get great treatment in a one-off deal. All right, everybody. This was just kind of an open, raw conversation today. So
I hope you don't have an interview after this.
No interviews. This is it. This is the show today. But listen, go to jasonhartman.com, check out the properties, check out the educational products, the blog articles. If you're not a member yet, for a whopping $120 a year, by the way, a lot of people have been becoming members lately, so that's great. You can get on those monthly members only Jason Hartman University calls, and those are really a great resource. Anyway, we just thank you so much for listening. Thank you to everybody who came out to our Memphis property tour, and it looks like our next property tour, although it's not totally confirmed, will be in Atlanta in probably late July. So listen to more on that. We'll do the Creating Wealth seminar and the property tour at that event as well. So more to come on future shows and on the jasonhartman.com website in the events section. Thank you so much for listening. Happy investing to everyone. Thanks for joining me, Sara.
Thank you.
What's great about the shows you'll find on jasonhartman.com is that if you want to learn how to finance your next big real estate deal, there's a show for that. If you want to learn more about food storage and the best way to keep those onions from smelling up everything else, there's a show for that. If you honestly want to know more about business ethics, there's a show for that. And if you just want to get away from it all and need to know something about world travel, there's even a show for that. Yep, there's a show for just about anything. Only from jasonhartman.com, or type in Jason Hartman in the iTunes Store.
This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company, all rights reserved. For distribution or publication rights and media interviews, please visit www.hartmanmedia.com or email media@hartmanmedia.com. Nothing on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and the host is acting on behalf of Platinum Properties Investor Network, Inc. exclusively.